Okay, friends. Hi. Hello. Welcome back to another Sinister Saturday. Buckle in because today's story, it's one of those where everything feels totally normal until suddenly you're like, wait, what? And it all starts in the most random, least haunted place imaginable, a coin laundromat in Wisconsin. Which honestly feels illegal because laundromats already give off spooky energy without any crime actually happening. But here we are. So picture it. It's October, which means Wisconsin is doing that chilly, oh, we're not winter yet, but we're gonna pretend like we are type of thing. It's dark, it's gloomy, it's 9 p.m., and two sisters, Heather and Jessie, walk into a laundromat bundled in winter coats like they're trekking through Antarctica, and with them is Heather's two kids, a toddler and a little baby boy named Benson. He's only 11 weeks old, a tiny newborn peanut. These sisters though, these girls, they're on a mission. This is not let's leisurely fold laundry and chat energy. No, this is socks everywhere, machines humming, coupons tucked in your bra type of energy. They already have clothes in the washer, clothes in the dryer, clothes that need to be moved, folded, reorganized, blessed by God, whatever. It's a whole system. Jessie is entertaining the toddler, swinging him gently, trying to keep him from having a meltdown because toddlers are basically emotional landmines. Meanwhile, baby Benson is knocked out in his car seat. No fussing, no cooing, not giving even a single peep, just snoozing like a tiny angel baby. And look, it's cold outside, it's late at night, they're doing chores, nobody's having a spectacular time, but everybody's managing. It's one of those everyday, nothing special moments families have all the time. Until it's not. Jessie is folding clothes, doing her thing, and then she randomly leans over to peek at baby Benson. You know, the casual auntie check. Is he still sleeping? Is he cute? Is he breathing? Is he about to wake up and scream bloody murder? Just a standard mental checklist. But instead of relaxing, she freezes. Like, freezes. She looks again, and then again, closer this time, and she calls out, quiet but shaky, "Heather, come look. Why are his lips blue?" Heather runs over and she sees her baby, her whole world, and she stops breathing for a second. Benson's lips are blue. Not just cold outside blue, not just needs to be warmed up type of blue, but wrong. And worse, they look like they're stuck together, like glued shut. His whole face looks pale and ghostly. Something is very, very off. She lifts him from the car seat and he is ice cold. Not just chilly, not a little cool from the weather. No, he's ice cold. And every parent in the world knows what that means before anyone says it out loud. There's CCTV footage from this moment actually, and it's heartbreaking. Jessie, realizing what is happening, scoops up the toddler because he's freaking out now, and she's already dialing 911 with shaky hands. Heather is laser focused on chest compressions. She's not crying, she's not screaming, she's not panicking out loud, but you can see the terror simmering behind her eyes. The 911 call is chaos. 911, what's your emergency? Please, God, this baby is dead. Please, we're at the laundromat on 3rd and Union. Please. The dispatcher tries to calm them down, tells them that they need to start CPR, but Heather's already doing compressions, desperately trying to breathe life back into her baby. The toddler is screaming, Jessie is crying, people are staring, and the world is spinning. Heather, eventually her voice cracks. I can't do this anymore. He's freezing cold. I can't. But the dispatcher keeps pushing her. Keep going. Help is on the way. Keep going. So she does, because what else can a mother do? But the truth, the awful truth, is that baby Benson is already gone. He had been gone before they even walked into the laundromat. He had been gone for hours. And I mean hours. So now everyone is asking, when did he die? How did he die? And how did no one notice? And this is where the story stops being a tragedy and starts becoming a whole horror show. Because shortly before Benson was found like this, there's CCTV footage of a couple walking into a McDonald's with 3 children, a toddler, and 2 babies in 2 separate car seats. One of those babies was Benson. They sat, they ate, they chatted, they ate fries, they behaved like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, one of those babies was already dead. Just think about that. By the time everyone grouped at the laundromat, just minutes later, the truth finally smacked them in the face. Something terrible, unforgivable, unspeakable had already happened, and whoever did it was still out there at this very moment. Police arrived at the laundromat. They see Heather still doing compressions, begging under her breath for Benson to wake up, please wake up. They step in and check for airway blockages. They can't even get his jaw open. Not because he's clenching, but because rigor mortis has already set in. His body is stiff. His legs are bent in the same exact angle that they would have been inside of the car seat. And that's how long he had been gone. So investigators start asking questions. Was Benson sick? Was there a fever? Any pre-existing condition? No. Was it SIDS, a random tragedy, a medical emergency? They check everything and nothing makes sense. And this is when Heather and Jesse tell the investigators something that makes them stop in their tracks. We think the babysitter did this. Now, when two hysterical sisters point fingers in tragedy, detectives don't jump to conclusions, but then they give details. At pickup, the babysitter Marissa acted weird, like weird. Her face was bright red, she was sweating, shaking, she was nervous, rushed. She didn't let them inside like she normally does. She kept the porch light off. She shoved the kids out the door like she was trying to sweep dirt under a rug. Jesse even noticed what looked like a hickey on her neck that wasn't there earlier. A hickey while babysitting. Okay. And Benson, when they picked him up, had his hat pulled down so far over his eyes that it almost covered half of his face. They didn't think too much of it in that moment. They didn't want to wake a sleeping baby, but now it looked like camouflage, a cover-up. Heather admits that she barely lifted his hat because she didn't want to disturb him. That tiny act of mercy haunts her later because she realizes that she never saw his face, and now this. Heather breaks down in the laundromat. That girl killed my baby, she says. I picked him up from her house and he was already gone. Then the police hear Jesse whisper, I texted her. I told her that she killed him. I shouldn't have, but I was so angry. The detectives then ask what the babysitter's name is. Marissa Tisort. And the officers freeze because they know that name. They know it too well. She is legally forbidden from being around children. She has been investigated for hurting multiple infants before, and she has caused injuries, brain bleeds, skull fractures, and now another baby has died after leaving her care. Detectives exchange looks they don't want the family to see. They have a very, very bad feeling about this. This is where things start spiraling out of control in a way that feels like it should be a Netflix series, but nope, this is real life, and real life is wilder. So, detectives are standing in the laundromat, Benson's tiny body already showing clear signs that he had been gone long before his mother even realized it. The toddler is still sobbing. Jesse's shaking so hard that the officer next to her keeps asking if she needs to sit down, and Heather just looks like the world has caved in. You can tell that her brain is switching between numbness, rage, and absolute heartbreak. And then the babysitter's name comes up, Marissa Tisort. The detectives react like someone just said Bloody Mary in a bathroom mirror. They don't say anything dramatic out loud, but you know those moments in crime shows when detectives give each other that look like, oh no, not her again. Yeah, that. Because Marissa wasn't just some random inexperienced teenage babysitter who forgot nap time protocol. She wasn't someone who just accidentally gets overwhelmed with kids. No. This girl had a record. A history so concerning that Child Protective Services practically had her photo laminated in their "Do not leave this human with children" binder. So detectives leave the laundromat to start the next step, track her down. But before they do that, the medical examiner arrives to take Baby Benson's body. And everyone just goes silent. It's the type of silence you can feel pressing against your skin. They confirm rigor mortis, they confirm that his jaw is fixed, and they confirm that his legs are still stuck in that curl car seat position. And you know what's truly gut-wrenching? Heather sees him struggling to open his jaw and realizes that his lips looked stuck together earlier because they were. That's not dehydration, it's not sleep, it's not cold weather, it's death. Heather collapses sobbing, apologizing to him over and over again, and that sound is the type of sound that sticks to your bones. But the moment that grief hits them, the anger hits too. Because if rigor mortis had already set in, Benson had to have died at least 3 to 4 hours before 911 was called. And that timeline drops the pin directly on the babysitter. So, let's rewind. Who the hell is Marissa Tisort? Well, buckle up, because, yeah. Marissa is 33. She's married. She frequently volunteers to watch children, which should be adorable, but in context is absolutely not. She has 3 major child injury investigations before this night. Not 1, not 2, 3. So let me paint the picture. Case 1 of the harming children investigations, she accidentally drops a baby, causing a skull fracture. Case 2, another infant ends up with a bruise pattern that suspiciously lines up with fingers. And then case 3, a baby ends up with a brain bleed after being left alone with her for less than an hour. And in every one of these cases, she swears that she didn't do anything. It was an accident. She barely touched them. But guess what? Every time she escapes charges because there wasn't enough clear evidence, and because the injuries always happened behind closed doors, and since the babies were too young to speak, she walked. She walked free. But CPS was like, okay, she can walk around on Earth, I guess, but absolutely not around kids. So she was placed on a restriction, meaning legally she wasn't allowed to babysit children, especially infants. And yet tonight she had 3 of them. 3. So when detectives hear her name at the laundromat, that's why their stomachs drop, because not only did this woman have a suspicious past and she wasn't even supposed to be near a baby at all, let alone a newborn, they immediately drive to her house, 2 patrol cars, 1 unmarked SUV, and they don't even bother with lights because they already know that this is going to be messy. They knock. No answer. They knock again. Still nothing. Meanwhile, Heather and Jesse are still at the laundromat giving statements, describing everything that they noticed at pickup, things that suddenly make horrible sense now. Marissa answered the door with a bright red face, like she had been running or panicking. She kept wiping her hands on her pants. Her voice was shaky. She would not make eye contact, and she would not let them inside, which is weird because the baby's diaper bag was inside, and she usually invites them in while she finishes packing it. Tonight, no. She basically shoved the kids at them and closed the door. Jessie remembers seeing something red near Benson's hat. She thought that it was his blanket, and now she realizes that it was his face. She didn't see it clearly because the hat was tugged so low. And then there was the hickey-looking mark on Marissa's neck, which was most likely a hickey. Her hair was messy, her shirt was on backwards, she smelled of sweat and cheap perfume. It was off. But you know how you don't want to judge someone too quickly? You don't want to assume they're doing something inappropriate? Yeah, so the sisters said nothing. Now they're replaying every second like a horror reel. Detectives keep knocking on Marissa's door, and finally, they get an answer. It's her husband, and he answers like a man whose whole world is about to cave in, except he doesn't know it yet. Detectives say, "Is Marissa home?" And he goes, yeah, why? Detectives then say, "We need to speak with her regarding the children that she babysat earlier this evening." He freezes. Children that she what? Let me repeat that. He had no idea that she was babysitting any children tonight. which instantly tells detectives that she hid it from her husband. She knew she wasn't supposed to be around kids, and she planned around that restriction. So the husband steps aside and calls for her, and Marissa walks out like she didn't just step into a tornado. Honestly, officers say that she looked strangely calm, like too calm. She was the kind of calm that suggests she's trying to hold her face together like a cracked vase. Detectives then ask her, "Can you explain what happened tonight with the children in your care?" And she immediately starts crying. But it's not the kind of emotional collapse you'd expect when someone tells you that a baby died. It's the kind where tears come out before an actual emotion, like she practiced crying in the mirror. And she tells detectives, "I don't know what happened. I swear he was alive when they picked him up, I swear." But here's the thing, cops already know she's lying. Yeah, I already know she's lying, you can tell. Because the medical examiner had already confirmed Benson had been gone for hours. Then detectives ask her to walk through the timeline. And oh boy, it's messy. She says that she fed him at 3 o'clock, put him down at 4, checked on him at 5, and he was breathing fine. And then she doesn't remember checking on him again after that. And fun fact, Heather picked up the kids around 7:30, and Benson was already in full rigor by 9. So what does this mean? He died long before she claims that she last checked on him. But the detectives don't call her a liar to her face yet. They want her to talk. And when people talk under pressure, they say things that they shouldn't. So then they ask the million-dollar question. Were you alone with the children the entire time? She suddenly stops crying. "I mean, my husband was home." Detectives exchange a look. "Was anybody else home?" they ask, and she hesitates. One of my friends came over just for a bit," she says, and there it is, the crack in the wall. Because when people start withholding information, it's never just one detail, it's a whole web. "Which friend?" they ask. And then she's like, "Just a friend, you don't know them." Detectives press harder, and she refuses. Husband is confused, and detectives know every second. And they know whatever happened in that house between 3 p.m. and 7:30 p.m., Marissa is terrified of telling them. Not because she's innocent, but because someone else was involved, and she's covering for them. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Benson's official examination begins. And what they discover is so disturbing, so violent, so horrifying, that this entire case transformed from sudden tragedy to a full-blown homicide investigation. When little Benson's body arrives at the hospital, the medical examiner already knows that this isn't a normal case. This isn't a mysterious SIDS situation. This isn't an unexplained collapse. This baby arrived in full rigor mortis at a laundromat with no visible signs of illness. That alone tells them something is very wrong. But when they start the exam, oh my gosh, the medical examiner documents the first clue immediately. Benson's jaw is locked shut, so tight that they need tools to open it. And that tells them that he's been deceased for hours, long before anyone realized it. But when they finally get the jaw open, his tongue is bruised. Not from biting, not from choking, but bruised like someone forced something into his mouth. Bruised like pressure was applied. Bruised like he struggled. That right there is the moment that the ME looks at the nurse assisting and says, "This isn't natural." But things only get worse. When they examine his head and his neck, they find small hemorrhages, petechia, those tiny blood spots that happen when vessels rupture under pressure. And those are a massive red flag because petechia shows up in cases of suffocation and strangulation. Then they check his face. There's swelling around his nose and bruising, extremely subtle but present along the sides of his mouth, like fingers, like someone had covered his nose and his mouth at the same time. Then they checked his torso. More bruises were found, some faint, some more defined, but nothing that could be brushed off as infancy clumsiness or, "Oh, he bumped into a toy." These look deliberate. They look like restraint. The medical examiner writes in the notes, inconsistent with normal infant care. Then we get to the worst part. The ME rolls Benson gently onto his side, and that's when they see it. Bruising on both sides of his ribs. Symmetrical, uniform, perfect fingerprints. Someone squeezed this baby, like hard. Hard enough to leave bruises that showed up even through infant fat. Hard enough to interfere with breathing, hard enough to potentially collapse his tiny airway. And then icing on this disgusting, awful cake, there was internal bruising. Not caused by CPR, not caused by Heather's desperate rescue attempts in the laundromat. Those are fresh bruises. These are older, deeper, and more forceful. These happened before he was ever buckled into the car seat for pickup, before Heather arrived at the babysitter's house, before the hat was pulled over his face. This baby was assaulted. So when the medical examiner finishes the initial report, they don't label it undetermined. They don't hold off pending more tests. They write the word homicide. Not possible, not suspected, straight up homicide. Meanwhile, detectives get the call about the preliminary findings while they're still standing in Marissa's living room. And everything changes. Up until now, they were treating this as a possible negligence situation. Now it's officially in a murder investigation. But before they can confront her, her husband suddenly speaks up and gives them a piece of information that flips this case on its head. He says that I wasn't home this afternoon. I left at 2 and didn't get back until 7. The detectives pause. Wait, so you weren't home while she was babysitting? He says, no, I didn't even know she was babysitting. She never said anything, and whose baby is it? The detectives, they're taking mental notes like furious little court stenographers. Because remember earlier, Marissa told detectives that her husband was home? She said she wasn't alone with the kids, and now the husband is telling them the exact opposite. Detectives look at him and gently ask, how long has she been babysitting behind your back? He looks confused, like genuinely confused, and he says that he thought that she stopped babysitting years ago because of the investigations. She told me that she wasn't allowed to do it anymore, he says, so she didn't. At least that's what he thought. Then he goes quiet and his face goes pale. Wait, was she with a man today? Was someone here? Detectives ask why he's asking that. And he says, because the neighbor told me earlier that they heard a man's voice inside of our house around 5 and I wasn't home. The room goes silent. A man's voice at 5 p.m. inside the house while a newborn was dying? So now the timeline looks like this. Benson likely died between 3:30 and 5:30 p.m. A man's voice was heard between 5 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. Marissa hid this detail. A known babysitter with a violent past was alone with 3 children during the time that Benson died. And she's refusing to say who the man was. Detectives are like, buckle up because we're about to be here all night. They then ask her again, who were you with today? The truth. And this time, she snaps. I don't remember. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. Like, lady, calm down. Her husband, this poor man who had no clue of what was happening, turns to her and says, Marissa, who was here today while you were watching those babies? She then doesn't answer. She just looks down and cries harder. Fake crying, the dramatic shoulder shaking, no tears kind. The detectives decide to switch tactics because they know if they push too hard, she'll shut down completely. So one detective asks a very simple question. Did something happen while you were feeding him? And then she stops moving. She's not crying, she's not breathing, just still. The kind of stillness that screams guilt. So they then follow it with, did you get frustrated with him? She whispers, no. Did he cry? She then again says no. Did he stop breathing? Another no. Did you put your hand over his mouth to quiet him? No answer. She didn't say no, yes, this, that, and the other. She gave no answer. Her husband looks horrified. He asks her directly, Marissa, did you hurt him? She screams, I didn't do anything. Crazy lady, like, okay, yeah, we believe you didn't do anything. But the scream isn't defensive. It's like a panicked scream. It's frightened, cornered animal energy. And detectives know that scream. They've heard it from guilty people for their entire careers. Meanwhile, more information is flooding into headquarters. They get a call from the mom's sister, Jessie, who admits that she texted Marissa something earlier. I told her that she killed him. I was so angry, she didn't answer. Detectives say, wait, she didn't respond at all. And she says no. That detail, it may seem small, but is huge, because if someone is being falsely accused of killing a baby, they normally respond immediately. They say something like, no, I didn't. Oh my gosh, what happened? Is he okay? I didn't hurt him. But silence is the loudest confession in the world. Then the detectives who examined Benson's clothing calls in with another discovery. There is fresh blood on the collar of his onesie. Not internal bleeding, not spit up blood. And you want to guess where the blood came from? His mouth. So how does blood come from a baby's mouth? Either from force trauma or from suffocation so violent that blood vessels ruptured internally. And that matches those tongue bruises exactly. So now detectives go back into the living room where Marissa is sitting, rocking back and forth, clutching a blanket like it's going to magically erase reality. They sit down in front of her and they say, we have evidence that Benson was assaulted. He suffered trauma to his mouth, his neck, and his ribs. This didn't happen hours after he left your house. This didn't happen in the car. This didn't happen suddenly or unexpectedly. This happened while you were the last adult responsible for him. And Marissa, she doesn't go, what? Oh my gosh, is he okay? She just says, I didn't mean to. The room freezes. Detectives look at each other like, there it is. There's the confession. But before they can ask what she means, she clamps her mouth shut and refuses to say another word. Her husband whispers, what didn't you mean to do? Nothing. Dead silence. So then the detectives tell her that she needs to come into the station for further questioning. She doesn't argue. She doesn't protest. She doesn't even ask why. She just stands up. And that is how you know she's guilty. But guilty of what exactly? Murder, negligence, covering for somebody, or all three? And who the hell was the mystery man heard in the house? Because next, this case is about to take the turn that nobody, not even detectives, saw coming. So detectives escort Marissa to the station. She's not in handcuffs yet, but she's walking like someone who feels the walls closing in. They place her in an interview room, plain, boring, beige, the kind of room designed to strip every sense of comfort from your soul. Meanwhile, detectives stay behind in the house with her husband because they need to figure out one very important thing. Who was the man in the house? Now, the husband keeps saying he has no idea who could have been there. He had no friends over, no brothers, no cousins, nobody with a key. And he hadn't been home for most of the day. He's pacing, rubbing his face, replaying the day, trying to figure out how a grown man ended up inside of his home with his wife and 3 children without his knowledge. And there's something crucial here. He didn't even know she was babysitting. That means that she hid babysitting from CPS and hid it from her husband. She hid it from her neighbors and now apparently had a man over while she was babysitting. So detectives start searching the house, legally with consent from the husband. They photograph the living room, the furniture, the hallway, the bedrooms. They're looking for anything out of place, a glass that doesn't belong, shoe prints, cigarette butts, clothing that isn't his, receipts, wrappers, anything. And then one detective notices something odd. There's a blanket on the couch, but not just any blanket. It looks rumpled, like someone was lying on it recently. And underneath that blanket, a man's t-shirt. Not the husband size, not his brand, not something that he recognizes. Uh-oh, now they're thinking, did this mystery man take part in whatever happened to Baby Benson? Did something happen between Marissa and that man? Was there fighting, a panic, an accident, something worse? They can't assume anything yet, but they know enough to know that the timeline is rotten. Meanwhile, at the station, Marissa is sitting alone in the room, breathing heavy, shifting in her chair, and pulling at her sleeves. She keeps glancing up at the camera corners like she's checking to see if someone is watching her. They are. Detectives are watching through the observation room, and they're picking apart everything that she does. Every twitch, every pause, every breath. Because the big part of the interrogation isn't what people say, it's how they sit in their silence. After about 15 minutes, the lead detective walks in. He sets a bottle of water down on the table and sits down. "Marissa," he says gently, "we need to have a real conversation." She then nods, because what else is she gonna do? Sit there and cry and not say anything? She's gonna have to sit there until she says something. At first, she does the whole poor me body language, shoulders hunched, lips trembling, tissue clutched dramatically in her hand, all the things an innocent person would not be worried about performing. But the detective, he's been doing this for 30 years. He's not impressed. So he starts simple. "Who was in your home today?" She looks down at her lap and whispers, "No one." He doesn't react. He writes it down slowly. Then he asks, "Did Benson cry while you were watching him?" She says no. "Did you feed him today?" She hesitates. "He ate earlier." He then asks what time. She then says, "I don't know." "How did he act after he ate?" "I don't remember." This woman is "I don't remembering" harder than a politician during a scandal. So the detective shifts gears. He then says Benson has injuries that did not come from CPR or accidents. Someone put hands on him. Someone pressed on his face. Someone squeezed him. We know what happened. We just need to know the truth. And for the first time, her mask cracks. Just a split second, but enough. Her lip twitches, her eyes widen, she inhales sharply, and the detective leans in. "You're not a monster. People make mistakes. Sometimes they panic. But if you don't tell us what happened, we can't help you explain it." This is interrogation strategy 101. He's not calling her innocent, but he's giving her a path to confession. She takes the bait. She whispers, "I didn't mean to." Bingo. But detective stays calm. He asks, "Did he choke?" She then tells him no. "Did he fall?" Once again, no. "Did you shake him?" No. Long silence. "Did you cover his mouth?" The question that keeps popping up. She doesn't answer. "Did you put your hand over his face to stop him from crying?" Her chin quivers, and she whispers, "He wouldn't stop screaming." There it is, the moment. Detective freeze behind the glass. Everyone watching sees it. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it is a confession. She continues, barely audible. "I was tired. I was overwhelmed. I just wanted him to stop for a minute." Then through slow, fragmented sentences, she begins explaining what happened. She says, "The kids were crying, all three of them. I couldn't think. I had a headache. He just kept crying and crying." And then detective asks, "What did you do?" She wipes her face. "I put my hand over his mouth, just for a second, just to quiet him." The detective doesn't move. "How long did your hand stay there?" he says. Another long pause. "I don't know." "Did he stop crying?" "Yes." "Did he stop moving?" Her breath shakes. "Yes," she says. And then she gives the detail detectives knew was coming. His lips turned blue. She says she panicked. She says she didn't mean to hurt him. She said that she thought he would breathe again if she shook him gently. She didn't call 911 because she was scared to get in trouble. She says she waited and he didn't respond, and she froze. Then she did something that makes detectives sick. She buckled him back into the car seat with a hat pulled over his face to hide that he wasn't breathing. Then she says, "I kept checking, but he didn't wake up." The detective asks, "You knew he was dead?" She nods. Then he asks, "Why did you let his mother pick him up like that?" And then she says, "I didn't want her to see his face." Oh my God. Behind the glass, one of the detectives actually swears under his breath, because this is not negligence. This is not, "I made a mistake." This is covering up a homicide. But here's where everything flips. The detective in the room says, "Who was the man who came over? Did he know what happened?" She instantly shuts down. "I don't want to talk about him." "Why not?" the detective asks. "He didn't do anything." "How do you know?" "I just know." "Did he see the baby?" Silence. "Did he see that Benson wasn't breathing?" Silence once again. "Did he help you put the hat on him?" A long, shaking breath. "I don't want to get him in trouble." Bingo again. She just confirmed that there was a man there. She just confirmed that he was in the house. She just confirmed that he knew something was wrong. And let's be honest, nobody hides the identity of someone that's innocent. So detectives mark him immediately as a person of interest. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, the medical examiner gets deeper into the autopsy, and what they discover next makes them call detectives immediately. Benson didn't just suffocate. He had injuries consistent with shaking. He had bruises on his chest consistent with being gripped hard. He had bleeding behind his eyes, a classic indicator of abusive head trauma. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This wasn't just a slip or a second of panic. This was sustained violence. Multiple acts in multiple minutes, repeated trauma. A newborn cannot survive that. Detectives then return to the station, sit back down across from Marissa, and confront her with the autopsy. She breaks. She starts sobbing, real tears now, the kind that come with guilt finally slithering up your spine. "I didn't want to hurt him," she says. "I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to." But then the detective calmly asks, "Did a man who visited your home help you? Did he hurt the baby too?" And her reaction is not what anyone expected. She starts shaking her head violently, and she goes, No, he did not touch him. I swear he didn't touch him." "Then why hide his identity?" "Because I love him," she says. Oh, excuse me. Detectives look at each other like, so this wasn't just a babysitting shift, this was a whole secret affair. And that means she hid babysitting, she hid a man, she hid the baby's death, and she lied to multiple people to protect this mystery guy. So who was he? And what did he see? And why was he there? And why was she willing to let a mother pick up her dead child to protect him? Because next, detectives find out exactly who the man is. And this case goes from horrifying to something so twisted, so unexpected, it shocks even them. This is the section where investigators start finally piecing together a timeline. And once you hear it, you're gonna be like, oh, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a whole event. So when detectives sit down with Heather and Jesse, they're trying to reconstruct every single second before that moment in the laundromat. And remember, at this point, nobody really understands when Baby Benson died. They only know that he was already gone by the time they started laundry. But the question is, how long before that? What exactly happened? Well, the timeline starts to form, and it's chilling. Heather had dropped both kids off at Marissa's around 2 p.m. That's the beginning. Benson was fine. No bruises, no marks, no issues. He was healthy, happy, eating normally, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with him. They even have photos of him that day smiling, all bright-eyed and adorable. At 3:15 p.m., Heather texted, "You good? Everybody okay?" Marissa didn't respond. At 3:38, another text, checking in, "How are the boys?" Still no answer. Then at 4:10 p.m., Marissa finally responds with a super short, super weird message. "All good." That's it. No emojis, no details, no they're playing or just fed them, nothing. Which, if you're a parent, you know that's already suspicious because babysitters always give more details unless they're hiding something. And this girl, she was hiding an entire nightmare. At 5:30 p.m., Heather lets her know that she's on her way. When they arrive, things are instantly strange, and I mean strange. Enough that the sisters remember every detail. The porch light is off. The door that normally is wide open is barely cracked. And when Marissa opens it, she steps out fast, like she's trying to block the inside from view. Jessie later describes it like this. "It was like she didn't want us to see behind her." And honestly, she probably didn't. Because here's what investigators would later discover. Sometime between 2 p.m. and 5:30 p.m., something catastrophic happened inside of that house. Something violent, something fatal, something that left Baby Benson already in early stages of rigor mortis by the time that he was handed back to his mother. Let's pause for a second. Rigor mortis, that stiffness of the muscles, usually starts 2 to 6 hours after death. 2 to 6 hours. Meaning there's absolutely no universe in which Benson had just passed away shortly before they arrived. No, he had been dead for hours, and the babysitter knew. The evidence is in her behavior. When she hands over Benson, she keeps the hat pulled so far down his face that the brim covers part of his nose. She doesn't say that he's asleep. She doesn't comment on how calm he is. She doesn't even walk them to the car the way that she normally would. The moment they leave, she bolts back inside. And remember, Jessie noticed that red hickey looking mark on her neck, and something about her was sweaty, panicked, like she was vibrating with nervous energy. These sisters didn't know what was wrong, but you always know when you're standing next to someone who had just done something horrible. But the saddest part, the absolute gut punch, Heather didn't want to wake her baby by lifting his hat. She didn't want to disturb him. She trusted the babysitter, and she trusted that her child was warm and alive and safe. That tiny moment haunts her forever. So after the McDonald's trip, they head to the laundromat because they still don't know the truth. They still think everything is normal. But by the time they walk through those laundromat doors, it's over. And now investigators have to figure out how Benson died. Was he shaken? Was he squeezed, hit, suffocated, neglected, dropped? They don't know yet, but they already know one massive detail. This was not natural. This was not sudden. This was not peaceful. Benson had been dead for way too long for it to be any freak accident. When detectives speak to the first responders, they get even more disturbing information. When paramedics tried to open his mouth to clear his airways, they couldn't. It was sealed shut. Not because anything was blocking it, but because the body was too stiff to manipulate. His arms and his legs, they were fixed in the same exact position that he was in his car seat. That means that he had been dead in that position for hours before they even buckled him in for the car ride to McDonald's. Which brings us to the next part. Yes, the babysitter handed them their dead baby and they took him to McDonald's without knowing. That's how advanced the rigor was. Imagine how cold he must have been. Imagine how cold he must have been. Imagine how stiff. Imagine how horrifying this must be for a parent to realize later. So when the police hear Heather whisper, "She killed my baby, she killed him," they don't dismiss it. They take it seriously because the physical signs already line up. And then comes the bombshell. The moment the babysitter's name is spoken out loud, the whole investigation shifts. Marissa Tisort. Officers stop writing for a minute. They look at each other. They know this name. They know her face. They know her file. Because this girl, this babysitter, is not some sweet, inexperienced teenager. She's not a one-time offender. She's not a maybe she didn't know how to handle babies case. No. She's someone who is legally banned from caring for children. She has prior allegations, prior injuries, prior brain bleeds, prior skull fractures involving children that she was watching. This is someone who had been investigated multiple times and somehow still had access to babies. Somehow still found families. Somehow convinced people that she was trustworthy. Somehow slipped through every crack in the legal system, and now a child is dead. Detectives realize what this means. They aren't dealing with a tragic accident. They're dealing with a repeat offender. They're dealing with someone who has hurt children before, seriously, and may have escalated. So they go to her house, and this part, oh boy, when they knock on her door, she answered with this fake sweet, "Oh hi, what's up" energy. But detectives immediately see it, the red mark on her neck, the shaky hands, the messy house behind her, the stuff she clearly tried to clean too quickly. And when they tell her why they're there, her reaction is bizarre. Oh my gosh, really? He died? He was fine when they picked him up. Detectives look at her and they're like, "Girl, do you know we were not born yesterday?" But she sticks to that story, and she sticks to it hard. She then tells them he was fine, totally fine. I don't know what happened after they left. He was breathing whenever they walked out the door. I would never hurt a baby. But here's where she slips up. They ask her, when was the last time that you fed him? She hesitates, she stutters, she scrambles. I think it was like 4 something, or maybe 5. I don't know. He was asleep a lot. He slept all day. They press her. Did he cry? Did he fuss? Did he show any signs of distress? She says no, he was quiet the whole time, and that right there is the problem. Because an 11-week-old does not sleep for 3 to 4 hours in complete silence with no movement, no twitching, no fussing, no feeding, no diaper changes, no nothing. Unless they can't. Unless they're already gone. Investigators wrote that down. Baby was silent for 3+ hours. Silent, still, unmoving. That is not a baby. That's a body. But they don't confront her yet. They need autopsy results. They need a timeline airtight, and they need to watch her slowly crack. And oh, she will. Because this case, we're only halfway through the unraveling, and what comes next is even darker. So stay tuned. This is where things get really grim and disturbing. Up until now, we've been circling around the timeline, the strange behavior, the mysterious silences, and a eerie McDonald strip with a baby who had already been dead. But now the hard evidence comes in, and it confirms what everyone was already beginning to suspect. The autopsy report on Baby Benson was thorough, meticulous, and devastating. Investigators, medical examiners, and detectives combed over every detail of his tiny body. And here's the thing, it wasn't just an accident. The injuries were severe, multiple, and inflicted with force. Let me break it down for you in a way that medical examiners described it. Head trauma, severe blunt force trauma to the head, not one injury, but multiple, which means the impact was repeated or involved more than one strike. And then he had bruising. There were bruises on his chin, on his nose, and around his right ankle. These weren't consistent with a fall from a couch or rolling off a small piece of furniture. And then he had abrasions, which are scrapes on the skin that indicated that he may have been dragged or struck against something rough. And then we have the positioning. When he was found, he was face down in the pack and play, a sleeping position that is not recommended for infants, particularly if the baby has been handled roughly. Every single medical professional reviewing this case could tell that this was not suffocation. This wasn't a tragic accident caused by a baby rolling over. No, this was a deliberate trauma. Now, here's where Marissa's web of lies start to unravel. At first, when questioned by detectives, she sticks to the story. He was fine, I fed him, I burped him, I put him down, and then he was asleep. I didn't do anything. Classic line. Innocent, distraught, typical, I don't know what happened response. But the investigators know better. They know the timeline, they know the autopsy, they know that what she's describing doesn't match reality. And here's the kicker. She told multiple different versions to different people. To Adam, she says that she was just sleeping all day. To Heather, she says that she was feeding him and changing him and left him in the pack and play for a bit. To the police, initially, she claims that she didn't check on him before heading out to the McDonald's trip. This is textbook manipulation. Altering your story depending on who's asking, always trying to protect yourself, always trying to shape perception, and when confronted with inconsistencies, she panics. But the panic doesn't look like sorrow. No, it looks like calculation. Detectives noticed her behavior during the interrogation. And it's important to note this because the way she reacts is unsettling. She smiles like a crazy person, not a small, nervous smile, a wide teeth showing, almost giddy smile, while being told that her baby is dead. This is the part of the story that went viral online because it's genuinely disturbing. The smile doesn't fit the gravity of the situation. It's like a reflex, a coping mechanism, or a warning signal of someone who is completely disconnected from empathy in that moment. Then her face scrunches up. She closes her eyes and she makes a sound that is half cry, half squeal, and it's forced. The body language is telling. Usually when someone is in true shock and grief, the whole body reacts, trembling, collapsing, hands over the face, but she's rigid. Only her facial expressions are moving. Her body stays frozen, almost like she's performing sorrow rather than experiencing it. And this is where detectives start to zero in. They realize that she's not just lying about what happened, but she's carefully crafting reactions to appear guilty, but just enough to avoid full accountability. Now, let's rewind a little to understand the timeline of the actual fatal incident. Around 2 p.m., Heather drops Benson off. Marissa begins babysitting. Within an hour or two, Benson is crying, fussy, demanding attention. Marissa becomes frustrated. Now, it's important to note here that babies cry. Babies are hard work, but frustration does not excuse abuse. And in this case, the frustration escalates. Investigators eventually extract a chilling confession. She admits to picking Benson up, walking him over to the pack and play, and dropping him from about shoulder height into the pack. She left him crying for a couple of minutes and then repositioned him on his stomach and walked away. She then returned and he was dead. This part, it makes me so mad, dude, because a majority of you know that I'm pregnant right now and I'm having a baby boy in a month, and I would do some crucial things to somebody. Let me find out. And here's the sickening part once again. She insists that she didn't intend to kill him. But intent aside, the deliberate act of picking him up and dropping him into a confined space, coupled with her leaving him to cry and then ignoring his distress, demonstrates reckless disregard for life. And the injuries confirmed this. Multiple points of impact, bruising, broken bones, abrasions, blunt force trauma. This confession is what breaks the case wide open. And here's what it means. This was not neglect. This was not a tragic accident. This was abuse that led to death. The authorities at this point already have prior history on Marissa. Previous allegations, previous child injuries, prior terminations of parental rights. They realize that they're looking at a pattern and not just a one-time event. And the media coverage starts to explode. People are shocked. People are horrified. And how could someone with a history of child abuse still be babysitting? And how could she continue to lie about it so convincingly? Meanwhile, Adam's involvement becomes a question. Did he see what happened? Did he know? Did he participate? At first, he tries to shield Marissa, claiming that he didn't witness anything and that she handled everything. But the detectives notice discrepancies in his timeline. He changes his story multiple times, contradicting both Marissa's statements and earlier texts. He also exhibits aggressive, controlling, and explosive behavior during interviews. At this point, investigators know that they need to separate the couple. They remove Marissa from any childcare responsibilities and begin monitoring Adam carefully. They also start building a criminal case, not just for the death of Benson, but for her previous patterns of abuse. The legal implications are severe. Because of prior incidents, this isn't just a first offense case. The state can argue that she was a known risk, yet she continued to be in positions where children were under her care. That alone elevates the severity of charges. In addition, the detectives now have jailhouse communications. They monitor Marissa's calls and letters. And here's another unnerving piece. While incarcerated, she continues to manipulate, charm, and attempt to gain sympathy from men through letters. She complains about prison food, demands money, crafts her identity as a maternal innocent victim, all while the evidence points to her being responsible for Benson's death. She even writes letters urging her own family to avoid bad people, while her reality shows that she is arguably the most dangerous person in that room. She constructs this maternal image in letters and conversations, trying to convince others that she's a loving mother, even as her actions tell a completely different story. And the public, the world, they see snippets of these interviews, her strange smiles, the conflicting statements, and they're horrified. They're disgusted, and yes, the clips go viral. The smiling babysitter becomes a symbol of deceit, manipulation, and a cold-heartedness in the public imagination. From here, the investigators move toward building their case. Autopsy results, witness testimonies, text messages, inconsistencies in accounts, prior abuse history, and the confession itself. Everything stacks up, and the gravity of it all hits. This is a person who should have never been left alone with a child, but she had repeated access to infants, ultimately resulting in death. And what's particularly tragic, what makes this case hit differently than other child abuse cases, is the complete betrayal of trust. Heather, Benson's mother, trusted her baby to someone she believed was safe. She believed she could work, leave her baby in good hands, and come home to find him alive and unharmed. Instead, she lost her child because the babysitter was not only dangerous, but deceitful to the core. And the chilling part, Marissa does not show remorse in the way that people would expect. Her focus is often on herself, how she's perceived, what she needs, and her identity as a mother. And while the detectives and the public see that she has confessed, it's clear that even her confession is calculated. She admits action, but tries to downplay the severity. She wants to claim, I didn't mean it, I didn't know, and I didn't hurt him intentionally. But the evidence, the injuries, and the timeline leave no room for that argument. By the end of the investigation, one thing is undeniable. Marissa Tisort caused the death of Baby Benson. And it was far from an accident. It's a combination of deliberate action, reckless disregard, and a history repeating itself. It's a case that could have been prevented had prior warnings been taken seriously. So this part ends off with the case fully in the hands of the authorities. Arrest is imminent, charges are stacked, and the public is watching, horrified. And we're left asking ourselves, how could someone so manipulative, so dangerous, have access to children for so long? And what does this mean for Adam, for her other children, and for the system that failed to prevent this? Now, we're getting to the part of the story that really twists your brain and makes you wonder, how is anyone like this allowed to exist? So far, we've walked through Marissa's bizarre behavior, the autopsy results on Baby Benson, and the web of lies that she's been spinning. But now it's time for the arrest. And trust me, it's as chaotic as it sounds. After the confession, after all the inconsistencies, the detectives knew that there was no choice. Marissa Tisort had to be taken into custody. But if you think arrests are simple, calm, and procedural, oh no, it's not in this case. The police and social workers had to carefully plan how to remove her from any environment with children. Remember, this is a woman who had already had 4 of her own children permanently removed from her custody due to prior abuse. And yet, here she is, still pregnant, still babysitting other people's children, and still lying about the past incidents. The authorities could not risk leaving her unsupervised. And yes, I know I haven't mentioned, she's pregnant. So then, authorities go to her home. They serve the warrant. Marissa knows what's coming, but the way she reacts it's chilling. She acts nonchalant at first, walking past detectives like she doesn't see them, like she's invisible. Almost like she's in a different reality, a reality where the police aren't real and the consequences don't exist. When she's finally confronted, she goes through her old act, the I'm innocent act. She claims that she didn't do anything, once again, that she didn't hurt Benson, but she clearly did. That she's a good mom and that she's pregnant and she's sober, all of it. The whole narrative that she's been spinning for months suddenly gets condensed into one desperate, frantic performance. She's crying, she's pleading, she's using every trick she knows to elicit sympathy, except now she's speaking to people who already know the truth. This is when her jailhouse persona starts to take form. After she's booked, Marissa is placed in a cell. And here's where things get bizarre. Most people, after being arrested for something this serious, are quiet, reflective, fearful. But Marissa, she's already reaching out. She's already writing letters and making calls, trying to manipulate men into believing her sob story. She complains about the prison food, her medical treatment, how her unborn child is suffering. She's doing everything that she can to maintain control of her narrative. Her calls are monitored, which is standard in cases like this. The detectives hear a pattern emerging. She essentially is running a little empire from her jail cell. She's got a rotating cast of men she's manipulating through letters and phone calls, convincing them to send money, to marry her, to bear children for her when she gets out. And it's bizarre, almost like she's living in a parallel universe where she's the victim and the world is conspiring against her. Meanwhile, Adam is outside, also losing it. He's angry, he's combative, and he's flipping between defensive and aggressive. He yells at anyone who tries to intervene, including the police and social workers. He screams about custody of their living son, threatens lawsuits over prison mail, and drops racist and homophobic slurs in casual conversations. The authorities are now dealing with 2 adults who are both manipulative, but in very different ways. One violent and explosive, and the other is calculated and controlling. And then there's the McDonald's incident, which people online just can't get over. Remember, this is after Benson was already dead. Marissa goes out with Adam and the other kids to get food. Why? Was it an alibi? Was it a sheer indifference? Was it a life goes on mentality? Nobody really knows, but the optics are horrifying. Sitting there with a dead baby in the car, eating fast food, and acting like nothing happened, it's the kind of behavior that fuels viral stories and social media outrage. Now, here's where it gets more complicated. Marissa's also writing letters to her sister, Brittany, trying to control who she talks to, warning her against bad people while simultaneously spinning her own narrative to outsiders. She's obsessed with being seen as a maternal loving figure. She wants to craft her identity as someone who cares deeply for children, even as the evidence proves otherwise. Detectives also noticed that the text messages with Adam during this period leading up to the arrest, He's defensive and manipulative, trying to control the narrative from outside the jail cell, insisting that he had nothing to do with Benson's death and that Marissa is innocent. They argue, contradict, and even threaten the authorities. And the investigators are piecing together all these interactions to establish a timeline, prove who had custody, who was there, and who did what, because ultimately that's what the law needs. Facts, evidence, and a clear chain of action. So now let's talk about the jailhouse dynamic, because it's insane. Marissa is pregnant, yet she complains about the food, the lack of medical attention, and the conditions of her confinement. She constantly is seeking validation, constantly trying to assert that she's a good person who's being unfairly punished. In letters to her pen pal, she's creating a persona, the innocent, loving mother who's been victimized by the cruel system. It's manipulative, and it's calculative, and it's almost surreal. And the detectives, they're not buying it. Every word, every call, every letter is scrutinized. They're looking for admissions of guilt, for slips, for the truth behind the carefully constructed facade. And eventually, they get it. Her confession during the final interrogations is damning. She admits to the sequence of events that led to Benson's death, but even then she hedges, she softens, and she tries to minimize her responsibility. She says that it wasn't intentional. She says that she didn't know he would die. She says that she's a good mother. But the physical evidence, the autopsy, and the bruising, and the prior history all point to a different reality. At the end of the day, Marissa's jailhouse behavior reinforces what detectives already suspect. She's manipulative, self-centered, and dangerously focused on her own narrative. She's less concerned with Benson's death than how she's perceived, or how she's treated, and how she can maintain control over the story from behind bars. Meanwhile, Adam's behavior continues to complicate things. He tries to act as if he's supportive, but his explosive temper, his erratic statements, and occasional admissions makes it clear that he's not entirely trustworthy either. Investigators had to separate the facts from the chaos, and it's no easy task when the people involved are actively trying to manipulate them. And so the case moves forward. Marissa's in custody, Adam under scrutiny, and detectives compiling evidence for their prosecution. It's a perfect storm of manipulation, lies, and tragic consequences. So this is where this part ends. Marissa's officially in jail. Her letters and calls are revealing a disturbing obsession with maintaining her maternal image, and investigators are ready to build a case that will ensure that she faces justice for Benson's death. Now, we're at the finale, and honestly, the most chilling part of the story. By this point, Marissa Tisort is behind bars. She's confessed, the evidence is stacked against her, and yet the story isn't just about her. It's about how the system reacts, how families are impacted, and how bizarre human behavior can get when somebody is so wrapped up in their own narrative. So let's start with the trial. Marissa's case moves through the courts, and she's facing serious charges for the death of Baby Benson. The prosecution lays out the evidence, the bruises, the head trauma, the prior child abuse history, and her inconsistent statements. They present autopsy results, blunt force trauma to the head, abrasion on the body, and multiple injuries that clearly indicate this was more than an accident. Every forensic detail points to neglect or deliberate harm. During the trial, Marissa attempts to use her standard defense. I didn't mean to. It wasn't intentional. I love kids. I've been sober for 4 years. I'm pregnant. I'm a good mom. She even tries to argue insanity or diminished capacity. Citing past substance abuse and alleged brain damage, she claims that her actions aren't representative of who she truly is. But here's the thing, the law doesn't see it that way. The physical evidence, combined with her history and the sheer disregard for a baby's well-being, creates a clear picture of responsibility. Public reactions to this case are intense. People are horrified. Social media explodes with discussions about her smile during interrogations, her calm demeanor at McDonald's after Benson's death. Social media explodes with discussions about her smile during interrogations, her calm demeanor at McDonald's after Benson's death, and her manipulative letters from jail. Experts weigh in on her behavior, trying to explain it through psychological lenses. Some suggest narcissistic tendencies, others suggest sociopathy. But regardless of the psychological analysis, the core fact remains. A baby is dead, and a woman who was supposed to protect him failed spectacularly. Now let's talk about sentencing. The judge ultimately hands down a 37-year prison sentence. That number might sound extreme to some, but honestly, considering the prior history and the nature of Benson's injuries, it seems appropriate. Me personally, I think she should get life. But anyways, many online argue that it's not enough, just like I said. They point out the sheer number of children she's harmed or endangered in her life, and they argue that 37 years barely scratches the surface of accountability. And I agree. Marissa, of course, reacts in her usual way. She writes letters to the judge claiming that she's been treated unfairly, that she's a good person, and that she's a loving mother, and that she needs proper nutrition and care for her unborn child. She asks for bond reductions, ankle bracelets, and special treatments, all while the reality of her crime looms large. She's trying to maintain control even as the court strips her of her freedom and autonomy. Meanwhile, Adam continues to exist in the periphery. Some people wonder if he had any role in Benson's death. He insists that he didn't. He claims that he was asleep. He tries to argue that Marissa's actions were accidents. But the inconsistencies of his story, combined with his erratic, often threatening behavior outside the jail, make him a complicated figure. Authorities keep a close eye on him, but the focus remains squarely on Marissa. She's the one who physically handled Benson and created the circumstances that led to his death. And here's the most unsettling part. Marissa's persona doesn't really change, even after sentencing. She continues to craft a narrative of herself as a victim. She writes to pen pals, continues her manipulative communication with Adam, and remains obsessed with being seen as maternal and innocent. It's almost like she's living in a parallel universe where consequences don't exist, where the tragedy she caused is just a footnote in her life story. Heather and Benson's family, understandably, are left reeling. They trusted Marissa, they believed that she would care for their children, and in one catastrophic moment, that trust was shattered. Heather had no idea Marissa had a history of serious child abuse, or that she would babysit again, putting more children at risk. The emotional fallout for Heather and her family is immense. Not just a grief for Benson, but a deep, enduring mistrust that comes from realizing someone they relied on could act so recklessly. As for the broader public, this story goes viral, partly because of Marissa's bizarre behavior, partly because of the tragic circumstances, and partly because of the way she manipulated her image both before and after the crime. People dissect her facial expressions in interrogation videos, they debate her motivations, and they analyze every detail of her letters from jail. The story becomes a cautionary tale, one about trust, one about the dangers of manipulation, and one about consequences of the failure to protect children. In the end, what we're left with is a chilling portrait of a woman who prioritized her own narrative over the lives of children. Marissa's Tisort story is disturbing. It's not just because of the crime itself, but because of the way she navigated every stage of this tragedy with a bizarre mix of calm, manipulation, and self-interest. From babysitting, to lying about injuries, to confessions, to her letters from jail, every step reveals a complex, almost surreal personality, capable of detachment from reality and a disturbing level of self-preservation. And while Marissa serves her sentence, the conversation around her case doesn't end. Experts continue to analyze her behavior, social media continues to debate the intricacies of her actions, and parents everywhere are reminded of a very real importance of vetting caregivers and understanding the signs of potentially dangerous individuals. So to sum it up, the story of Marissa Tisort is one of tragedy, manipulation, and bizarre human behavior. It's about a baby who lost his life, a family who was betrayed, and a criminal justice system that ultimately held one woman accountable, though many still debate whether justice is truly served. Her letters, jailhouse antics, and interactions with investigators paint a portrait of someone who deeply self-absorbed and frighteningly manipulative, using every tool at her disposal to try to control the narrative of her life, even in the face of irrefutable evidence of her crimes. And that, my friends, is where we leave it. Marissa Tisort, convicted, sentenced, and infamous for a series of actions that shocked a community, haunted a family, and captured the attention of the public in ways that continue to be analyzed to this day. So I just want to say, stay safe out there. Keep an eye on people you trust with your kids, and remember, sometimes truth is stranger and far darker than fiction. I just want to say, have a great day, evening, and night. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, thumbs up, whatever you want to call it. Don't forget to subscribe and maybe share it with some friends or family.